What if the person you once loved became the thing you feared most? What if breaking up wasn't the end, but just the beginning of something far worse? Tonight, I'm sharing 6 true stories that will make you question everyone you've ever trusted with your heart. Stories that prove sometimes love doesn't die. It just gets twisted into something unrecognizable. These aren't your typical breakup stories. These are tales of obsession, revenge, and terror that will make you check your locks twice tonight. So turn off the lights, but maybe keep one finger on the switch. Because after these stories, you might not want to be in the dark. If you're brave enough to hear what happens when love turns deadly, stay with me. But I'm warning you now. Some of these stories don't have the endings you'd expect. In March 2019, 26-year-old Sarah Chen thought she had escaped the worst relationship of her life. She dated Marcus Rivera for 2 years, and what started as passionate romance had slowly twisted into something controlling and suffocating. Marcus was a freelance photographer, talented but unstable. He had a way of making Sarah feel like she was the most beautiful woman in the world one moment, then tearing down her confidence the next. The breaking point came when Sarah found hundreds of photos of herself on Marcus's computer. Photos she never knew he'd taken. Pictures of her sleeping, showering, getting dressed. Photos taken through windows, from hiding spots, during moments when she thought she was alone. When she confronted him, he claimed it was art. He said she was his muse, and he was documenting their love. Sarah moved out that night. She stayed with her sister Emma for 3 weeks before finding a small apartment across town. She changed her phone number, blocked Marcus on all social media, and thought she was finally free. But Marcus wasn't the type to let go easily. The first sign something was wrong came 2 months after the breakup. Sarah started noticing things in her apartment had been moved. Tiny things. A coffee mug facing a different direction. Books rearranged on her shelf. Her laptop moved just slightly from where she'd left it. At first, she thought she was being paranoid. Breakups mess with your head, right? Then she found the first photo. It was slipped under her apartment door on a Tuesday morning. A black and white picture of her sleeping in her new bed, taken just the night before. The angle suggested it was shot from inside her closet. Sarah's blood went cold. She called the police immediately, but they said without proof of forced entry, there wasn't much they could do. They suggested she change her locks and install a security system. Sarah did both. She installed cameras, changed the locks twice, and even had her sister stay over for a week. But the photos kept coming. Pictures of her at work, at the grocery store, at the gym. Always black and white, always perfectly composed. Marcus's artistic signature. The most disturbing part wasn't just that he was following her. It was how close he was getting. One photo showed her reflection in her bathroom mirror as she brushed her teeth. Another captured her reading in bed, and you could see the book title clearly. He wasn't just watching from a distance. He was inside her space, her life, documenting every private moment. Sarah became a prisoner in her own life. She stopped going out alone, stopped opening her blinds, stopped feeling safe anywhere. Her sister Emma begged her to move away, to disappear completely. But Sarah had a job, a life. She couldn't just run forever. 3 months after the first photo appeared, Sarah woke up to find something different. Instead of a single photo under her door, there was an entire envelope. Inside were dozens of pictures, spanning the entire course of their relationship and beyond. But these were different. These photos had been altered. In each image, Sarah's eyes had been carefully scratched out with a red pen. Her face was marked with angry slashes. Some photos had words written across them in Marcus's handwriting. "You belong to me. You can't hide. Forever mine." The final photo in the envelope made Sarah's knees buckle. It was taken the night before, showing her asleep in her bed. But this time, Marcus had photographed himself taking the picture. You could see his reflection in her bedroom mirror, camera raised, that familiar obsessive smile on his face. At the bottom, he'd written, "I'm always closer than you think." Sarah packed a bag that morning and drove straight to the police station. She demanded protection, showed them everything, begged them to arrest Marcus. They issued a restraining order and said they'd patrol her area more frequently. But when they went to Marcus's last known address, he was gone. The apartment was empty, except for one thing: a dark room he'd set up in the bathroom, with hundreds of photos of Sarah hanging from lines like a twisted gallery. Sarah never went back to her apartment. She stayed with Emma for 2 weeks, barely sleeping, jumping at every sound. Then, just as she was starting to breathe again, Emma found something that changed everything. While taking out the trash one morning, Emma discovered a manila envelope taped to the underside of her car. Inside was a single photo: Sarah and Emma sitting at Emma's kitchen table the night before, taken through the window. On the back, Marcus had written, "Running won't help. I'll always find my muse." That's when Sarah realized the horrible truth. Marcus hadn't just been following her to her apartment. He'd been tracking her the entire time, learning her new patterns, her new safe spaces. He knew where she worked, where her sister lived, where she went to feel secure. The restraining order was just a piece of paper to him. Sarah and Emma decided to set a trap. They contacted an old friend of Marcus from art school, someone who might know where he was hiding. Through careful conversation, they learned Marcus had been staying in an abandoned warehouse downtown, one he'd used for photo shoots in the past. Instead of calling the police immediately, Sarah made a decision that still haunts her. She wanted to confront Marcus herself, to end this nightmare face to face. She asked Emma to wait in the car and call for help if she didn't come out in 30 minutes. The warehouse was dark and smelled of chemicals and decay. Sarah found Marcus in what used to be an office, surrounded by cameras and developing equipment. The walls were covered floor to ceiling with photos of her, thousands of them. Some were old, from when they were dating. Others were recent, showing her every move over the past 6 months. But the most disturbing discovery was what Marcus was working on when she arrived. He was developing a new set of photos, but these weren't of Sarah. These were pictures of other women. Different faces, different lives, but the same obsessive documentation. The same violated privacy. Sarah realized with growing horror that she wasn't Marcus's only victim. "You came back to me," Marcus said, without turning around. His voice was calm, almost relieved. "I knew you would. I knew you'd understand that what we have is special." "Marcus, this has to stop," Sarah said, trying to keep her voice steady. "This isn't love. This is sick." Marcus finally turned around, and Sarah saw that he'd lost weight. His eyes were bloodshot, and his hands were stained with photochemicals. "You don't get to decide what love is," he said. "I've documented every moment of your life. I know you better than you know yourself. That's real love." Sarah looked at the walls again, at the faces of the other women mixed in with her own photos. "Who are they?" she asked. Marcus smiled. a chilling expression that Sarah had never seen before. "My other projects. But don't worry, you're still my favorite. You're the one I can't let go." That's when Sarah noticed something that made her blood freeze. In the corner of the room was a bed, and on it were clothes. Women's clothes in different sizes, personal items, jewelry, things that looked like they belonged to the women in the photos. "Marcus," Sarah whispered. "Where are they? Where are these women?" Marcus's smile widened. "They're safe. They're preserved forever. Just like our memories. Just like you'll be." Sarah ran. She didn't wait to hear more, didn't try to reason with him. She just ran through the warehouse as fast as she could, while Marcus called after her. "Sarah, don't leave me again. We're not finished." Emma had already called the police when Sarah burst out of the building. Within minutes, the warehouse was surrounded. When officers entered, they found Marcus trying to destroy evidence, burning photos, and smashing camera equipment. What they discovered in that warehouse led to one of the most disturbing investigations in the city's history. Marcus had been stalking at least 12 different women over the past 5 years. 3 of them had disappeared completely. Police found personal belongings, detailed schedules, and thousands of photographs documenting the daily lives of his victims. Marcus was arrested and eventually convicted on multiple charges, including stalking, harassment, and kidnapping. But 3 women were never found. Their cases remain open, and investigators believe Marcus knows more than he's telling. Sarah testified at his trial, facing him one last time. Even in shackles, even surrounded by guards, Marcus never stopped staring at her. During her testimony, he whispered something that only she could hear. "I still have copies of everything." Marcus was sentenced to life in prison, but Sarah never felt truly safe again. She moved to a different state, changed her name, and still checks over her shoulder every day. Because sometimes, late at night, she gets the feeling that someone is watching. And sometimes, just sometimes, she finds things in her home that have been moved just slightly out of place. The police assured her it was impossible. Marcus was locked away, his equipment destroyed, his photos confiscated. But Sarah knows what obsession looks like. She knows how patient it can be. And she knows that some people never really let go. To this day, Sarah receives occasional reports that someone has been asking about her in her old neighborhood. Someone with a camera. Someone who claims to be an artist looking for his muse. The photos stopped coming, but the fear never did. Jessica Martinez thought she'd found her soulmate when she met David Walsh in college. He was everything she'd dreamed of in a partner. Attentive, romantic, and completely devoted to her. David would surprise her with flowers, remember every important date, and seemed to anticipate her needs before she even knew what they were. Their relationship moved fast. Within 6 months, David had practically moved into Jessica's dorm room. He walked her to every class, called her between lectures, and was always waiting when she finished work at the campus bookstore. Jessica's friends joked that she'd found her perfect boyfriend, but some of them started to worry that perfect might be too perfect. The first crack in David's perfect facade appeared during Jessica's junior year. She'd been accepted into a study abroad program in Spain for the summer, something she'd dreamed about since high school. When she told David the good news, his reaction wasn't what she expected. "You want to leave me for 3 months?" he asked, his voice strangely flat. "It's not leaving you," Jessica explained. "It's an incredible opportunity, and it's only temporary." David was quiet for a long time. Then he smiled that familiar, perfect smile. "Of course, babe. I'm happy for you. I'll miss you so much." But something had changed. Over the next few weeks, David became increasingly clingy. He started showing up to her classes unannounced, claiming he just wanted to see her face. He questioned her about every conversation she had with other people, especially men. He began insisting that they spend every free moment together. "We only have a few months left before you leave," he'd say whenever Jessica wanted to hang out with friends. "Don't you want to spend that time with me?" The breaking point came when Jessica discovered that David had been going through her phone. She caught him one morning while she was in the shower, scrolling through her messages and taking screenshots. When she confronted him, he didn't deny it. "I just want to make sure you're safe," he said. "There are a lot of guys trying to get your attention. I'm protecting you." "From what?" Jessica asked. "From making a mistake, from ruining what we have." Jessica realized then that David's perfect behavior had been controlling all along. The flowers were a way to mark his territory. The constant attention was surveillance. The devotion was possession. She broke up with him that day, just 2 weeks before she was scheduled to leave for Spain. David didn't take it well. "You're making a huge mistake," he told her, his perfect mask finally slipping. "No one will ever love you the way I do. No one will ever know you the way I do." Jessica spent her last 2 weeks on campus staying with different friends, avoiding the places she knew David would look for her. She thought once she got to Spain, she'd be free. She was wrong. The emails started on her 3rd day in Madrid. Long, rambling messages about how much David missed her, how he'd made a mistake, how they were meant to be together. Jessica deleted them without reading past the first few lines and blocked his email address, but David was persistent. He created new accounts, sent messages from different platforms, even had mutual friends forward his messages when Jessica blocked those accounts too. Then the packages started arriving. The first one contained a teddy bear holding a sign that said, "I'm sorry" in Spanish. Jessica threw it away. The second contained photos from their relationship with handwritten notes on the back. "Remember how happy we were? This could be us again. I'm waiting for you." Jessica contacted the program coordinator, who helped her file a complaint with local authorities. But since David was in the United States and wasn't making direct threats, there wasn't much they could do. They advised her to document everything and avoid posting her location on social media. That's when Jessica realized she'd made a crucial mistake. She'd been documenting her study abroad experience on Instagram, posting photos of the places she visited, the restaurants she tried, the friends she made. She thought she was safe thousands of miles away from David. She was wrong. The photos that arrived in the 3rd package proved David had been studying her social media posts like a roadmap. The package contained printed screenshots of her Instagram posts, but they'd been edited. David had photoshopped himself into every picture. There was Jessica at the Prado Museum, and there was David standing beside her. Jessica having dinner with her study abroad group, and there was David sitting at the table. Jessica laughing with her new friends, and there was David with his arm around her. It was disturbing enough to see him inserted into her new life digitally. But what made Jessica's blood run cold was how accurate the Photoshop work was. David had perfectly matched the lighting, the angles, the settings. It was as if he'd actually been there. Jessica stopped posting on social media immediately and made all her accounts private, but the packages kept coming. The 4th one contained a plane ticket to Madrid with David's name on it, dated for the following week. The 5th contained a printed itinerary showing all the places Jessica had visited, with notes in David's handwriting. "Our first date spot in Madrid, where we'll have dinner, our romantic evening walk." Jessica was terrified. She contacted the study abroad office, her parents, and the local police. Everyone told her the same thing. Until David actually showed up or made a direct threat, they couldn't do much. But Jessica knew David better than that. He didn't make threats. He made plans. She started varying her routine, avoiding the places she'd already posted about, staying in groups whenever possible. Her study abroad experience, which should have been the adventure of a lifetime, became a constant state of fear and hypervigilance. Then, exactly 1 week after the plane ticket arrived, Jessica saw him. She was sitting in a cafe near her host family's apartment, trying to study for an exam, when she glanced up and saw David across the street. He was standing perfectly still, wearing the same blue jacket he'd worn in their last photo together, just watching her through the window. Jessica's hands shook as she gathered her things. She paid quickly and headed toward the back exit, but when she looked over her shoulder, David was gone. She wondered if she'd imagined it, if the stress was making her paranoid. But when she got back to her host family's apartment, there was another package waiting. This one contained a single photo. Jessica sitting in the cafe that afternoon, taken from across the street. On the back, David had written, "Surprise, I told you I'd always find you." Jessica didn't sleep that night. She sat by her bedroom window, watching the street, jumping at every shadow. Her host mother, Senora Rodriguez, noticed her distress and asked what was wrong. Jessica tried to explain, but how do you tell someone that your ex-boyfriend has followed you to another continent? The next morning, Jessica found David waiting outside the building where she attended classes. He looked exactly the same, except thinner, and there was something different in his eyes, something hungrier. "Jessica," he called out, as if they were old friends meeting by coincidence. "What are the odds? I'm in Madrid too." Jessica turned and walked in the opposite direction, but David followed. He kept pace beside her, talking as if nothing had changed. "I know you're probably surprised to see me," he said, "but I realized I couldn't live without you. I've been miserable these past few weeks. I sold everything I owned to buy that plane ticket. I'm staying in a hostel just a few blocks from your host family's place. Isn't that amazing? We can explore the city together, just like we planned." "We never planned that," Jessica said without looking at him. "I broke up with you. I don't want you here. You're just confused," David said, his voice taking on that familiar, controlling tone. "You're overwhelmed by being in a new place. But I'm here now. I can take care of you." Jessica ducked into a crowded metro station, hoping to lose him in the rush of commuters. But David knew exactly which train she needed to catch. He'd been studying her routine. When she got on the train, he got on too, sitting directly across from her, smiling that perfect smile. "You can't run from me forever," he said over the noise of the train. "We belong together. I've proven that by coming all this way." Jessica got off at the next stop, even though it wasn't her destination. David followed. She went into a pharmacy, hoping the public space would deter him. David waited outside. She tried to call the police, but her Spanish wasn't good enough to explain the situation clearly, and David technically hadn't done anything illegal. He wasn't threatening her or touching her. He was just there. This continued for 3 days. David followed Jessica everywhere, always maintaining just enough distance to avoid being accused of harassment. He'd appear at the cafe where she studied, the park where she liked to read, the metro station she used every day. He never approached her directly, never made threats. He just watched and smiled and made sure she knew he was there. Jessica's grades started suffering. She couldn't concentrate, couldn't sleep, couldn't enjoy anything about her experience. She felt like a prisoner in a city she'd dreamed of exploring. On the 4th day, Jessica made a desperate decision. She contacted her ex-roommate back home, a girl named Amy who'd always been good at research. Jessica asked Amy to dig into David's background to find out if he'd done this before. What Amy discovered was terrifying. David had had 3 serious girlfriends before Jessica, and each relationship had followed the same pattern: intense romance, increasing control, and when the girl tried to leave, escalating stalking behavior. One girl named Claire had gotten a restraining order against David after he followed her to her new job in another state. Another, named Megan, had been hospitalized after what police suspected was David tampering with her car brakes, though they could never prove it. The most disturbing discovery was about David's first serious girlfriend, a girl named Lisa who dated him in high school. According to Amy's research, Lisa had died in what was ruled an accidental drowning while on vacation with David. She'd supposedly fallen off a cliff during a romantic hike, but Lisa's family had always suspected David was involved. No charges were ever filed. Jessica realized she wasn't dealing with a heartbroken ex-boyfriend. She was dealing with someone who saw women as possessions and who had potentially killed before rather than let someone go. Armed with this information, Jessica went to the local police again. This time, she brought a translator and laid out everything she'd learned about David's history. The officer took her seriously and agreed to have a conversation with David about tourist visa restrictions and the consequences of harassment. But when police went to the hostel where David claimed to be staying, he wasn't there. The staff said no one by his name had ever checked in. David had been lying about where he was staying, which meant Jessica had no idea how close he actually was. That night, Jessica's host mother, Senora Rodriguez, heard someone trying to break into their apartment. She called the police immediately, and when they arrived, they found evidence that someone had been tampering with the lock on Jessica's bedroom window. The window faced a fire escape that could be accessed from the street. Jessica packed her bags that night. The study abroad program arranged for her to finish her coursework online from the United States. It wasn't the ending she dreamed of, but it was the safe choice. At the airport the next morning, Jessica thought she was finally free, but as she waited in the departure lounge, she received a text from an unknown number. "Enjoy your flight home. See you soon. Your perfect boyfriend." Jessica looked around frantically, searching for David among the crowds of travelers. She didn't see him, but that didn't mean he wasn't there. That didn't mean he wasn't on her flight. Jessica made it home safely, but the fear didn't end there. For months afterward, she'd catch glimpses of someone who looked like David in grocery stores, at gas stations, outside her apartment. She changed her phone number 3 times, moved twice, and started using her middle name professionally. 2 years later, Jessica received a friend request on Facebook from a profile with no picture. The name was different, but when she clicked on it, there was only one photo. A selfie of David standing in front of her old study abroad building in Madrid, holding a sign that said, "Still waiting." Jessica never accepted the friend request, but she also never felt completely safe again because she learned something terrifying about obsession. It doesn't follow the rules of time or distance. It doesn't respect borders or restraining orders. And sometimes, the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who'll destroy you rather than let you go. David Walsh was never arrested, never charged, never stopped. And somewhere out there, Jessica knows he's still planning their reunion, still believing they're meant to be together, still convinced he's the perfect boyfriend. The last Jessica heard, David had a new girlfriend, a girl who probably thinks she's found her soulmate, a girl who has no idea what happens when you try to leave someone who believes they own you. Jessica sometimes thinks about warning her, but she doesn't even know her name. All she can do is hope that girl figures it out in time. 23-year-old Maya Patel met Ryan Foster through a dating app in the summer of 2020. It seemed perfect timing. They were both stuck at home during lockdown, both working remotely, both craving connection in an isolated world. Ryan was charming through text, funny over video calls, and when they finally met in person after 2 months of virtual dating, Maya thought she'd found something special. Ryan was a social media manager for various small businesses, which explained why he was so good at crafting the perfect message, finding the right emoji, making every interaction feel curated and meaningful. He understood the digital world in a way that impressed Maya, who worked in accounting and barely posted on Instagram. Their relationship was modern romance at its finest. Ryan would comment on every photo Maya posted. Like every story, share articles he thought she'd enjoy. He introduced her to new platforms, helped her grow her social media presence, and made her feel like the most important person on the internet. "You're so photogenic," he'd tell her. "You should be sharing your beauty with the world." Ryan encouraged Maya to post more often, to share more details about her life. He'd help her craft captions, suggest locations for photos, even take professional quality pictures of her. Under his guidance, Maya's Instagram went from having 200 followers to over 20 in just a few months. But what Maya didn't realize was that Ryan wasn't just helping her build her online presence. He was documenting it. The relationship lasted 8 months, ending in February 2021 when Maya discovered Ryan had been messaging other women on dating apps the entire time they'd been together. When she confronted him with screenshots a friend had sent her, Ryan didn't deny it. "We never said we were exclusive," he said, even though they absolutely had. "You told me you loved me." Maya replied, "I do love you. That doesn't mean I can't talk to other people." Maya realized Ryan saw relationships the same way he saw social media. It was all about engagement, about keeping multiple conversations going, about maximizing his options. She wasn't his girlfriend. She was his most successful content creation project. She broke up with him immediately and blocked him on all platforms. Ryan seemed to accept it gracefully, which should have been Maya's first warning sign. For a few weeks, Maya felt free. She took a break from social media, focused on work, reconnected with friends she'd neglected during the relationship. But slowly, she started noticing strange things happening to her online accounts. Her Instagram posts were getting likes from accounts she didn't recognize, generic usernames with no profile pictures, accounts that had been created recently but had no posts of their own. Her Twitter mentions included comments from random people who seemed to know details about her life that she hadn't shared publicly. Maya initially dismissed it as spam or bots, but then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. The fake accounts weren't just liking her posts randomly. They were liking them in patterns that spelled out messages. Maya had posted a series of photos from a weekend trip to visit her sister. If you looked at which photos the mysterious accounts had liked, and in what order, it spelled out MISSYOU across the likes. Maya screenshot everything and tried to trace the accounts back to their origins, but they were expertly created. Each one had just enough activity to look real, a few posts stolen from other accounts, some generic comments on popular posts, follows and followers that seemed organic but were clearly manufactured. That's when Maya realized Ryan's expertise in social media management extended far beyond legitimate marketing. He knew how to game the system, how to create authentic-looking fake accounts, how to manipulate engagement metrics. And he was using all of those skills to send her a message. "I'm still here." Maya changed her privacy settings, made her accounts private, and thought that would solve the problem. But Ryan was always one step ahead. The fake accounts that started following her weren't just random bots anymore. They were accounts impersonating people from Maya's real life. An account appeared claiming to be her college roommate, using photos stolen from the real roommate's Facebook. It sent Maya a direct message saying, "Hey girl, let's catch up," with details about their shared memories that were accurate enough to seem legitimate. When Maya called her real roommate to verify, she learned the woman's Instagram account had been hacked weeks earlier. Another fake account claimed to be Maya's cousin, sharing family photos and inside jokes. It took Maya 3 days to realize this cousin had been deployed overseas and hadn't had internet access in months. Ryan wasn't just creating fake accounts. He was stealing the identities of people in Maya's life, using social media to research their connections to her, and then impersonating them to get closer to her again. Maya reported every fake account she discovered, but new ones appeared faster than she could block them. Instagram and Twitter's response was always the same. They'd investigate, maybe remove an account after a few weeks, but by then, 3 new ones had taken its place. The harassment escalated when Ryan started using the fake accounts to spread lies about Maya. Accounts impersonating her friends would post comments on her photos saying things like, "Maya, you really hurt Ryan. You should apologize," or "I can't believe you cheated on him." Maya watched helplessly as her online reputation was systematically destroyed by someone who understood social media better than she ever would. Friends started asking her about drama they'd seen online. Family members questioned her about posts they thought she'd made but hadn't. The most disturbing escalation came when Ryan started creating fake accounts that impersonated Maya herself. Maya discovered this when her real friend called her, confused about a conversation they'd had over Instagram DM the night before. Maya hadn't sent any messages, but when her friend showed her the screenshots, it was clearly her profile picture, her username with a barely noticeable extra letter, and her writing style. The fake Maya account had sent her friend intimate details about Maya's sex life with Ryan, claiming she missed him and was thinking about getting back together. The messages were written in Maya's voice, with her mannerisms, using inside jokes only Ryan would know. Maya realized Ryan had been studying her communication patterns during their relationship, learning to write like her, think like her, impersonate her so convincingly that even her close friends couldn't tell the difference. She found dozens of fake accounts using her name and photos. Some were messaging her family members, sharing embarrassing stories. Others were contacting her coworkers, posting inappropriate content that could damage her professional reputation. One was even messaging men on dating apps, using her photos to catfish unsuspecting victims. Maya felt like she was losing her identity. Every time she tried to control her online presence, Ryan created new ways to manipulate it. He was essentially erasing the real Maya and replacing her with versions of herself that he controlled. The situation reached a breaking point when Maya received a call from her boss. Someone claiming to be Maya had sent emails to all of her clients, making inappropriate jokes and sharing personal information that violated company policy. Maya's boss was questioning whether she was having a mental health crisis. Maya realized Ryan wasn't just harassing her for revenge. He was systematically destroying her life, using social media as a weapon to isolate her from friends, family, and career opportunities. She hired a lawyer specializing in cyber stalking, but the legal options were limited. Ryan was technically careful never to make direct threats. He wasn't using his real name on any of the fake accounts. And because he spread the harassment across multiple platforms and fake identities, it was difficult to prove it was all coming from one person. Maya decided to take matters into her own hands. She'd learned a few things about digital investigation from trying to track Ryan's fake accounts, and she started building a case against him. She created her own fake account and began following Ryan's real social media profiles. What she discovered was chilling. Ryan wasn't just targeting her. He was running similar operations against at least 3 other ex-girlfriends. Ryan had basically turned harassment into a full-time job. He had spreadsheets tracking his different fake accounts, calendars scheduling when to post certain content, even analytics measuring the engagement his harassment campaigns were generating. Maya found evidence that Ryan was actually monetizing some of his fake accounts, using them to promote products and services between harassment posts. He'd turned stalking into a business model. Armed with this evidence, Maya was finally able to get law enforcement to take her case seriously, but by the time they obtained warrants for Ryan's devices and accounts, he'd already disappeared. Ryan's apartment was empty, his phone disconnected, his legitimate social media accounts deleted. He'd vanished into the digital world he knew so well, leaving behind only the fake accounts that continued to torment his victims. Maya eventually got most of the fake accounts removed, but it took over a year and cost her thousands of dollars in legal fees. She had to change her name professionally, rebuild her online presence from scratch, and still checks every new follower request with paranoid scrutiny. The worst part is that Maya never knows when it might start again. Social media platforms make it too easy to create new accounts, steal photos, impersonate others. Ryan could be back tomorrow with a new batch of fake identities, ready to restart his campaign of digital destruction. Maya learned that breaking up with someone in the social media age doesn't just mean cutting off personal contact. It means being vulnerable to someone who knows your entire digital life, your patterns, your friends, your professional network. Someone who can use that knowledge to destroy you from the inside out. 6 months after Ryan disappeared, Maya received a friend request from an account with no profile picture. The username was just a random string of numbers and letters. When she clicked on the profile, there was only one post. A photo of her own apartment building, taken recently, with a caption that said, "Some connections never really end." Maya never accepted the friend request, but she also never stopped looking over her shoulder, because she learned that in the digital age, your ex doesn't just know where you live. They know where you exist online. And for someone like Ryan, that's all the access they need to make your life a living hell. Maya still uses social media, but carefully, minimally. She knows that every post, every photo, every interaction is potentially giving someone ammunition to use against her. She's learned to live in the spaces between her online presence and her real life, always aware that someone might be watching, documenting, planning. The scariest part isn't what Ryan did to Maya. It's how easy it was for him to do it, and how little protection exists for people like her. Social media companies build platforms designed for engagement and connection, but they also create perfect tools for harassment and control. Maya sometimes wonders how many other Ryan Fosters are out there, using their digital expertise to torment ex-partners. How many fake accounts in her current followers list might be someone else's stalker? How many innocent posts might be part of someone else's harassment campaign? In the end, Maya realized that breaking up with Ryan wasn't the end of their relationship. It was just the beginning of a different kind of relationship. One where he had all the power and she had none. A relationship that existed entirely online, but had very real consequences in her physical world. And unlike a normal breakup, there was no clean ending, no closure, no final goodbye. Because in the digital world, nothing ever really goes away. It just gets hidden, repackaged, and shared again under a different name. When 29-year-old Amanda Torres started dating Jake Morrison in 2018, she thought she'd finally found someone mature enough to handle a real relationship. Jake was 31, had a good job in marketing, owned his apartment, and seemed to have his life together. After a string of disappointing relationships with men who couldn't commit, Jake felt like a breath of fresh air. For the first 6 months, Jake was everything Amanda had hoped for. He was attentive without being clingy, successful without being arrogant, and he integrated seamlessly into Amanda's friend group and family. Amanda's parents loved him, her friends approved, and Amanda started thinking this might be the one. But as their relationship deepened, Amanda began to notice things about Jake that bothered her. He had a mean streak that came out when he was stressed. He'd make cutting remarks about her appearance, her job, her family. When Amanda called him out on it, Jake would apologize and claim he was just having a bad day. The apologies came with expensive gifts, jewelry, flowers, weekend trips. Jake knew how to make Amanda feel special again just when she was starting to question his behavior. It was a cycle that kept her off balance, never quite sure if the problem was real or if she was being too sensitive. The turning point came during Amanda's birthday party. Jake had planned what seemed like a perfect celebration at her favorite restaurant with all her closest friends. But halfway through dinner, Jake started telling embarrassing stories about Amanda, framing them as cute, but clearly designed to humiliate her in front of people she cared about. When Amanda pulled him aside and asked him to stop, Jake exploded. "I planned this entire party for you," he hissed. "I'm trying to make you happy and you're criticizing me? You're so ungrateful." Amanda's friends noticed the tension, and several of them asked if she was okay. That's when Amanda realized that Jake's perfect boyfriend act was just that, an act. Behind closed doors, he was controlling, manipulative, and cruel. Amanda ended the relationship 2 weeks later. She'd been dreading the conversation, expecting Jake to try to manipulate her into staying. Instead, he was surprisingly calm. "I understand," he said. "I haven't been my best self lately. Maybe some time apart will be good for both of us." Amanda was relieved that he was taking it so well. She should have known better. The first sign of trouble came when Amanda's best friend Lisa called her 3 days after the breakup. "Amanda, did you tell Jake some really personal stuff about me?" Lisa asked. Amanda's stomach dropped. "What kind of stuff?" "He messaged me on Facebook saying he was worried about you, that you'd been talking about some concerning things I'd told you in confidence." He mentioned, "Amanda, he mentioned things I never told you. Things I've never told anyone." Amanda realized Jake had been going through her phone during their relationship, reading her text messages with friends, learning intimate details about their lives. Now he was using that information to reach out to them, pretending to be concerned about Amanda while revealing that he knew their secrets. Over the next week, Amanda received similar calls from 4 other friends. Jake had contacted each of them with the same story, that he was worried about Amanda and wanted to share some concerning information he'd learned about them during the relationship. But Jake wasn't just sharing secrets randomly. He was strategically targeting the people Amanda was closest to, the ones she'd need most for emotional support after the breakup. And he was doing it in a way that made Amanda look like she'd been gossiping about them behind their backs. Amanda tried to explain to her friends that Jake had violated her privacy, that she'd never shared their personal information with him. Most of them believed her, but the damage was done. There was now tension in relationships that had been solid for years. Jake had poisoned Amanda's support system. The harassment escalated when Jake started targeting Amanda's professional life. Amanda worked as a graphic designer for a small marketing firm, and Jake knew the names of her clients, her boss, her coworkers. He'd learned these details during casual conversations, and Amanda had never thought to hide them from someone she trusted. Jake created fake online reviews for Amanda's company, posting scathing complaints about her work specifically. He claimed to be a former client who'd received unprofessional service from Amanda, detailing projects she'd actually worked on but describing them as failures. When Amanda's boss confronted her about the reviews, she tried to explain that they were fake, posted by her ex-boyfriend out of revenge. But from her boss's perspective, it sounded like Amanda was making excuses for legitimate customer complaints. Jake was smart about it. He didn't post all the fake reviews at once, which might have looked suspicious. Instead, he spread them out over several weeks, making them look like a pattern of dissatisfied customers. He varied the writing style, used different email addresses, and included just enough accurate details to make the complaints seem credible. Amanda's reputation at work suffered. She was removed from her biggest client account and given a formal warning about her declining performance. Jake was systematically destroying her career, and there was little she could do to prove it. But the worst was yet to come. Jake had been in Amanda's apartment countless times during their relationship. He knew her routines, her schedule, where she kept important documents. He'd helped her set up her home security system, knew her passwords, even had a key that he'd supposedly returned after the breakup. Amanda started noticing small things out of place in her apartment. Her mail seemed to have been opened and carefully resealed. Items on her desk were arranged differently. Her laptop had been moved slightly from where she'd left it. At first, Amanda thought she was being paranoid. Breakups mess with your head, make you see threats that aren't there. But then she found concrete evidence. Her credit card statements showed purchases she hadn't made. Small amounts at first. A coffee here, a magazine there. Things that could be mistakes or identity theft. But when Amanda looked closer, she realized the purchases were too personal to be random fraud. Someone had bought her favorite brand of shampoo, her preferred coffee blend, magazines she actually read. Someone who knew her habits and preferences intimately. Jake was using her stolen financial information to buy things, but he wasn't doing it for money. He was doing it to let her know he still had access to her life, that her most private information wasn't safe from him. Amanda changed her locks, her passwords, her credit cards. She installed new security cameras and started documenting everything. But Jake was always one step ahead. When she blocked his access to one part of her life, he found another way in. The harassment campaign reached its peak when Amanda discovered Jake had been impersonating her online to destroy her reputation in her professional community. He'd created fake profiles on design forums and social media groups, using her real name and photos, but posting controversial opinions and starting arguments with other designers. Jake knew Amanda's industry well enough, from their conversations to fake expertise in her field. He posted harsh criticisms of other designers' work, made inappropriate comments about industry leaders, and generally behaved in ways that made Amanda look unprofessional and difficult to work with. By the time Amanda discovered the fake profiles, the damage was extensive. Other designers in her network had seen her posts and formed negative opinions about her character and professionalism. When Amanda tried to explain that someone was impersonating her, it sounded like she was making excuses for her own bad behavior. Amanda hired a lawyer and a private investigator, but proving Jake was behind the harassment was more difficult than she'd expected. He'd been careful to cover his digital tracks, using VPNs and fake email addresses. The evidence was circumstantial. Who else would know enough about Amanda's life to conduct such a targeted campaign? But circumstantial evidence wasn't enough for law enforcement. Jake hadn't made direct threats or physically harmed Amanda. Everything he'd done existed in legal gray areas. 1. Fake reviews, identity theft for small amounts, impersonation online. Each individual act might result in minor charges, but together they represented a coordinated campaign of psychological warfare. Amanda realized Jake's revenge wasn't designed to hurt her physically. It was designed to isolate her, destroy her reputation, and make her question her own sanity. He wanted to prove that leaving him was the biggest mistake of her life by making sure her life fell apart without him. The campaign continued for 8 months. Amanda lost clients, friends questioned her judgment, and she spent thousands of dollars on legal fees and security measures. She felt like she was fighting a ghost, someone who could strike at any time but never revealed himself directly. Then, suddenly, it stopped. No more fake reviews appeared. No more mysterious purchases on her credit cards. No more friends receiving strange messages from Jake. Amanda waited for the other shoe to drop, but weeks passed without incident. Amanda later learned why the harassment had ended, and it wasn't because Jake had moved on. Jake had started dating someone new, a 26-year-old teacher named Rachel who had no idea what she was getting into. Through mutual acquaintances, Amanda heard that Jake was giving Rachel the same treatment he'd given her in the beginning: expensive gifts, romantic gestures, integration into her social circle. Jake was playing the perfect boyfriend again, which meant all his energy was focused on the new relationship. Amanda knew she should warn Rachel, but how do you tell someone that their seemingly perfect boyfriend is actually a master manipulator who will systematically destroy their life if they try to leave him? How do you explain that someone who seems so charming and successful is actually dangerous? Amanda tried to find Rachel on social media, but Jake had already isolated her from online spaces where Amanda might reach her. Rachel's profiles were locked down, her friend lists hidden. Jake had learned from his experience with Amanda and was being more careful about protecting his new victim from outside influence. Amanda made one attempt to warn Rachel, sending a message through a mutual friend. But by then, Jake had already poisoned Rachel against Amanda, describing her as his crazy ex-girlfriend who couldn't accept that their relationship was over. Amanda's warning was dismissed as jealousy, and Rachel blocked any further attempts at contact. Jake had successfully isolated his new victim, while positioning himself as the reasonable one who was just trying to move on with his life. 2 years later, Amanda learned that Rachel had also tried to leave Jake. The same pattern had played out: the systematic harassment, the professional sabotage, the isolation from friends and family. But Rachel hadn't been as prepared as Amanda. She'd moved away from the city entirely, changed careers, and essentially started her life over from scratch. Amanda realized that Jake didn't just target ex-girlfriends out of anger or hurt feelings. This was his pattern, his method of control. He used the information gained during relationships as ammunition for when those relationships ended. Every intimate conversation, every shared secret, every moment of vulnerability became a weapon in his arsenal. Amanda still lives in the same city, still works in the same field, but she's never felt completely safe. She knows that Jake is still out there, probably with another victim, building another arsenal of personal information that he'll use if that relationship ends badly. The scariest part isn't what Jake did to Amanda. It's how good he was at it, and how little protection exists for people like her. Jake never broke any major laws, never left enough evidence for serious charges, never crossed the line from psychological harassment into physical threats. But he destroyed Amanda's sense of security, her trust in future relationships, her belief that leaving someone means they actually leave your life. He proved that in the modern world, an ex-partner with enough determination and digital savvy can remain a presence in your life indefinitely. Amanda now screens potential partners carefully, keeps her personal information private for much longer, and maintains separate social media accounts that boyfriends never see. She's learned to compartmentalize her life in ways that feel unnatural but necessary. Because Amanda learned that some people don't just accept rejection. They turn it into a career, a hobby, A years-long project of proving that no one leaves them without consequences. And the scariest part is how normal they can seem until you try to walk away. Jake Morrison is still out there, still dating, still building relationships with women who have no idea what happens when you disappoint him. And Amanda knows that somewhere another woman is probably discovering right now that her perfect boyfriend isn't who she thought he was. The cycle continues because people like Jake don't change. They just get better at hiding who they really are until it's too late for their victims to escape unscathed. 31-year-old Elena Vasquez thought she'd found her happily ever after when she married Michael Chen in 2017. Michael was everything she'd wanted in a husband. Stable, family-oriented, and completely devoted to making their life together perfect. He had a successful career in finance, owned a beautiful house in the suburbs, and talked constantly about starting a family. Elena had been through enough bad relationships to recognize a good man when she saw one. Michael brought her flowers every Friday, remembered important dates, got along wonderfully with her parents, and treated her like a queen. When he proposed after just 8 months of dating, Elena didn't hesitate to say yes. Their wedding was like something out of a fairy tale. Michael spared no expense, insisting that Elena deserved the perfect day. He planned every detail himself, from the flowers to the music to the menu. "I want everyone to see how much I love you," he told her. "I want this to be a day no one ever forgets." The first year of marriage was blissful. Michael and Elena settled into domestic life easily. He cooked elaborate dinners, planned romantic weekend getaways, and talked excitedly about the children they'd have someday. Elena had never felt so loved, so cherished, so completely taken care of. But as their second year of marriage began, Elena started noticing small changes in Michael's behavior. He became more interested in her daily schedule, asking detailed questions about where she'd been and who she'd talked to. He started suggesting that she didn't need to work since his salary was enough to support them both. "I want to take care of you," Michael would say. "You shouldn't have to stress about a job when we're trying to start a family." Elena liked her job at a nonprofit organization, but Michael's arguments made sense. They were trying to get pregnant, and it would be nice not to worry about maternity leave or childcare costs. After some discussion, Elena agreed to quit her job and focus on being a homemaker. Without work to occupy her time, Elena found herself increasingly isolated. Michael discouraged her from making plans with friends during the day, saying he wanted her to be available when he got home from work. He started calling her multiple times throughout the day, claiming he just wanted to hear her voice, but becoming irritated if she didn't answer immediately. "I work hard all day to provide for us," he'd say. "The least you can do is be here when I need you." Elena began to feel like a beautiful bird in a golden cage. Michael showered her with gifts and attention, but always on his terms. He chose her clothes, her hairstyles, even her friends. When Elena protested that she felt suffocated, Michael would remind her of all the sacrifices he was making for their future together. The breaking point came when Elena discovered she was pregnant. Instead of the joy she'd expected to feel, Elena was overwhelmed with dread. She realized that having a child would tie her to Michael permanently, and something deep in her gut was telling her that was a mistake. Elena started secretly researching Michael's past relationships. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Michael had been married once before, to a woman named Jennifer who died in a car accident just 2 years into their marriage. According to the police report, Jennifer had been driving alone late at night when she'd crashed into a tree. The accident was ruled driver error, possibly due to fatigue. But when Elena dug deeper, She found Jennifer's social media posts from the months before her death. Jennifer had written about feeling isolated and controlled. She'd posted about missing her job, her friends, her independence. In her final post, just 3 days before the accident, Jennifer had written, "Sometimes I feel like I'm disappearing into someone else's idea of who I should be." Elena realized that Michael had done to Jennifer exactly what he was doing to her. He'd isolated her, controlled her, made her completely dependent on him. And when Jennifer had tried to reclaim her independence by getting back in touch with old friends and talking about returning to work, she died in a convenient accident. Elena couldn't prove Michael had killed Jennifer, but she knew she couldn't stay to find out if history would repeat itself. The problem was that Michael had made her completely financially dependent on him. She had no job, no savings of her own, and no way to support herself if she left. Elena started planning her escape carefully. She began selling pieces of jewelry Michael had given her, small items he wouldn't miss. She opened a secret bank account and started saving every penny she could hide from household expenses. She researched women's shelters and legal aid organizations. But Michael was watching her more closely than she realized. "You seem distant lately," he said one evening over dinner. "Is everything okay with the baby?" Elena forced a smile. "I'm just tired. Pregnancy is exhausting." "You know you can tell me anything, right?" Michael's voice was gentle, but there was something cold in his eyes. "We don't keep secrets from each other." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Jennifer, about the car accident, about how easy it would be to stage something that looked like a tragic mistake. When she finally drifted off, she dreamed about driving off a cliff while Michael watched from the roadside. Elena woke up knowing she had to leave immediately. She waited until Michael left for work, then packed a single bag with essentials. She emptied her secret bank account, left her wedding ring on the kitchen table, and drove to her sister Maria's house 3 hours away. Maria was shocked to see Elena on her doorstep, pregnant and clearly terrified. When Elena explained what had happened, Maria insisted they call the police immediately. But Elena knew there was no crime to report. Michael had never hit her, never threatened her directly. He'd just been controlling and possessive, which wasn't illegal. Elena stayed with Maria for a week, trying to figure out her next move. She knew Michael would come looking for her eventually, and she was right. On the 7th day, he showed up at Maria's house with flowers and tears, begging Elena to come home. "I know I've been overprotective," he said, "but it's only because I love you so much. I'm sorry if I made you feel trapped. We can work this out, I promise." Michael's performance was Oscar-worthy. He seemed genuinely remorseful, genuinely committed to change. He promised Elena could go back to work, could see her friends more often, could have more independence. Even Maria seemed to soften toward him. But Elena had done her research. She knew this was part of the pattern. Abusers always promised to change when their victims tried to leave. They became the perfect partner again, just long enough to regain control. "I need more time," Elena told him. "I need to think about what's best for our baby." Michael's mask slipped for just a moment. Elena saw a flash of rage in his eyes, quickly hidden behind a concerned smile. "Of course," he said. "Take all the time you need. I'll be waiting." After Michael left, Elena made a decision that probably saved her life. Instead of going back to him or staying with Maria where he could find her, she disappeared completely. Elena used her secret savings to rent a cheap apartment in a different state under a fake name. She dyed her hair, changed her style, and got a job at a small cafe that paid cash under the table. She was 6 months pregnant and living like a fugitive, but for the first time in months, she felt safe. Elena gave birth to her daughter, Sophie, in a public hospital using false identification. She knew the birth certificate would create a paper trail that Michael might eventually follow, but she couldn't give birth completely off the grid without risking her daughter's health. For 8 months, Elena lived quietly under her assumed identity. She worked at the cafe, took care of Sophie, and tried to build a new life. She was careful never to use social media, never to contact old friends, never to do anything that might reveal her location. Then one day, Elena came home from work to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Elena's heart stopped. She'd been so careful, so cautious, but somehow Michael had found her. She considered running immediately. But all of Sophie's things were inside, and Elena couldn't abandon everything again. Elena crept into the apartment, expecting to find Michael waiting for her. Instead, she found something worse. Evidence that he'd been there, but had left. Her laptop was open to a search page about car seat safety. Her baby formula had been moved from the kitchen to the coffee table. Sophie's birth certificate was laid out on Elena's bed. Michael wasn't there, but he'd left a message as clear as if he'd written it in blood. "I know where you are. I know about our daughter, and I'm coming back for both of you." Elena packed immediately and drove through the night to another state. But she knew running wouldn't work forever. Michael had resources, connections, and an obsessive dedication to tracking her down. He would never stop looking, and eventually, he would find her again. Elena made the hardest decision of her life. She contacted a lawyer who specialized in helping domestic abuse victims disappear permanently. The lawyer explained the process. Elena would have to give up her old identity completely, including her relationship with her family. She would need new documents, a new name, a completely fabricated history. The worst part was that Elena would have to cut off all contact with Maria and her parents. As far as they would know, Elena and Sophie had vanished. They would spend the rest of their lives wondering what had happened, never knowing that Elena was alive and safe. But Elena knew it was the only way to protect Sophie. Michael would never stop hunting for them, and he had the patience and resources to search for years. The only way to truly escape was to become someone else entirely. Elena's transformation took 6 months and cost her every penny she'd saved. She emerged with a new name, a new social security number, and official documents that created a fictional history for both her and Sophie. They moved to a small town across the country where no one would think to look for them. Elena got a job at a local library under her new identity. She rented a small house, enrolled Sophie in daycare, and slowly began building relationships with their neighbors. For the first time since she'd met Michael, Elena felt like she could breathe, but Elena never stopped looking over her shoulder. She knew that Michael was still out there, still searching, still believing that she and Sophie belonged to him. She'd seen what he was capable of, what had happened to Jennifer, and she knew that Michael would rather see them dead than truly free. 3 years passed peacefully. Elena began to hope that maybe Michael had given up, that maybe she and Sophie were finally safe. Then one morning, Elena found a single white rose on her doorstep, the same type Michael used to bring her every Friday when they were married. There was no note, no obvious threat, but Elena knew it was from Michael. He'd found them again, and he was letting her know that he was close. Elena packed their bags that day and moved again, starting the process of building new identities all over again. Elena realized that escaping Michael wasn't something she could do once and be done with. It was an ongoing process, a lifestyle, a constant state of vigilance. She would spend the rest of her life running from a man who would never accept that she'd chosen to leave him. The scariest part wasn't just Michael's persistence. It was how normal he seemed to everyone else. Elena knew that Michael was probably dating someone new by now, playing the role of the perfect boyfriend, the devoted family man. His next victim would have no idea what she was getting into. No warning about what happened to women who tried to leave Michael Chen. Elena sometimes thinks about trying to warn his new girlfriend, but she knows it would only expose her location and put Sophie in danger. All she can do is hope that the next woman is smarter, stronger, or luckier than Jennifer had been. Elena and Sophie live quietly now in their fourth city with their third set of identities. Sophie calls Elena by a name that isn't the one she was born with, in a place that will never truly feel like home because they might have to leave at any moment. But they're alive, and they're together, and Elena counts that as a victory, because she knows that for women like Jennifer, the story ended very differently. Elena escaped Michael's golden cage, but she knows that millions of other women are still trapped in similar situations, convinced that the gilded bars around them are really expressions of love. Elena learned that some men don't see women as people with their own dreams and desires. They see them as beautiful objects to be collected, controlled, and kept. And when those objects try to reclaim their humanity, some men would rather destroy them than let them go. Michael Chen is still out there, still charming, still looking for his next victim. And Elena knows that someday, somewhere, another woman will meet a perfect gentleman who wants to take care of her forever. She'll think she's found her prince, never realizing she's actually found her jailer. Elena just hopes that woman will be brave enough to run before it's too late. Because Elena learned that sometimes the only way to save your life is to disappear from it completely. 25-year-old Chloe Anderson met Nathan Price through an online gaming community in early 2021. They started as teammates in a multiplayer game, then moved to private voice chats, then to video calls that lasted until dawn. Nathan lived in Portland while Chloe was in Chicago, but the distance seemed manageable in the age of digital romance. Nathan was everything Chloe had hoped to find in a partner. He was intelligent, funny, supportive of her career as a freelance writer, and seemed to genuinely care about her thoughts and feelings. They talked for hours every day, shared their deepest secrets, and planned visits that never quite worked out due to work schedules and pandemic restrictions. For 8 months, their relationship existed entirely in digital spaces. They knew each other's voices better than their faces, shared inside jokes that made no sense to anyone else, and built an intimacy that felt more real than any relationship Chloe had experienced in person. Nathan was patient with the distance, understanding about the delays in meeting, and supportive when Chloe went through difficult periods with her work and family. He seemed like the perfect long-distance boyfriend, someone worth waiting for. When they finally made plans to meet in person, Chloe was nervous but excited. Nathan was going to fly to Chicago for a long weekend, and they'd finally have the chance to see if their digital connection translated to real-world chemistry. 3 days before Nathan's visit, Chloe received a message that changed everything. The message came from a woman named Lauren Mitchell, who claimed to be Nathan's ex-girlfriend. But Lauren wasn't reaching out to cause drama or warn Chloe about Nathan's past. She was reaching out because she was terrified. "I know this is going to sound crazy," Lauren's message began, "but I think Nathan Price is planning to hurt you. I dated him for 2 years, and when I tried to leave him, he became obsessed with making me pay for it. I think you might be part of that plan." Lauren explained that she'd been in a relationship with Nathan from 2018 to 2020. Like Chloe, she'd met him online and been swept off her feet by his charm and attention. But when Lauren tried to end the relationship, Nathan had refused to accept it. "He told me that if he couldn't have me, he'd make sure I'd never be happy with anyone else," Lauren wrote. At first, I thought it was just the usual bitter ex-boyfriend talk. But Nathan is different. He's patient, methodical, and he never forgets a slight. Lauren attached screenshots of conversations she'd had with Nathan after their breakup. The messages were disturbing in their calculated cruelty. Nathan had systematically researched Lauren's new relationships, her career prospects, her family situation, and had found ways to sabotage each area of her life. Nathan had contacted Lauren's employers with false allegations about her conduct. He'd reached out to men she'd dated, pretending to be a concerned friend while sharing embarrassing stories about her. He'd even contacted Lauren's family members, spreading lies about her mental health and personal life. But the most chilling part of Lauren's message was what she discovered about Nathan's current activities. "I've been monitoring Nathan's online presence since our breakup," Lauren wrote, "because I needed to know if he was still targeting me. About 6 months ago, I noticed he'd started spending time in gaming communities he'd never shown interest in before. When I investigated further, I found profiles and conversations that mentioned you by name." Lauren had screenshots proving that Nathan had been researching Chloe long before they'd met in the game. He'd found her social media profiles, her professional website, articles she'd written, and had built a comprehensive dossier of her life and interests. Nathan hadn't met Chloe by chance. He'd targeted her specifically, learned her interests and preferences, and had crafted a persona designed to appeal to her. Their entire relationship had been a manipulation from the very beginning. "I think Nathan is using you to get back at me," Lauren explained. "He knows that I've been trying to rebuild my life, and he wants to prove that he can destroy anyone I might care about. He's been telling people in our old social circle about his perfect new girlfriend and showing them your photos. I think he's planning to hurt you as a way of hurting me." Chloe's first instinct was to dismiss Lauren's message as the ravings of a jealous ex-girlfriend. But the evidence was overwhelming. The screenshots, the timelines, the detailed documentation of Nathan's obsessive behavior, the retinine. It was too consistent and too well documented to be fabricated. Chloe confronted Nathan about Lauren's allegations during their regular video call that night. Nathan's reaction was immediate and intense. "She's absolutely insane," Nathan said, his face flushing with anger. "Lauren is a pathological liar who's been stalking me since our breakup. She can't stand to see me happy with someone else." Nathan's explanation sounded reasonable at first. He claimed Lauren had been the one stalking him, creating fake accounts to monitor his activities, and now she was trying to sabotage his new relationship out of jealousy. But as Nathan continued talking, Chloe noticed inconsistencies in his story. He claimed not to remember details about his relationship with Lauren that he'd mentioned to Chloe months earlier. He became increasingly agitated when Chloe asked specific questions about the screenshots Lauren had shared. Most disturbing was Nathan's reaction when Chloe suggested they postpone his visit until she could sort out the truth of the situation. "You're going to let some crazy ex-girlfriend ruin what we have?" Nathan's voice turned cold in a way Chloe had never heard before. "After everything we've shared, everything we've built together, you're going to choose to believe her over me?" The mask was slipping. For the first time in their 8-month relationship, Chloe was seeing Nathan angry, manipulative, and desperate to maintain control of the narrative. Chloe made the difficult decision to cancel Nathan's visit and take a break from their relationship until she could investigate Lauren's claims further. Nathan's response was immediate and vicious. "Fine," he said. "But don't come crawling back to me when you realize what a mistake you've made. And don't blame me for what happens to your precious career when people find out what kind of person you really are." That night, Chloe received dozens of messages from Nathan across multiple platforms. The sweet, supportive boyfriend she'd known for 8 months had disappeared. replaced by someone who was cruel, threatening, and clearly unhinged. Nathan's messages revealed the truth about their relationship. He admitted that he'd researched Chloe before approaching her, that he'd crafted his persona to appeal to her specific interests, and that their entire relationship had been part of a larger plan to hurt Lauren. "You were never anything more than a weapon," Nathan wrote. "A way to prove to Lauren that I could make anyone fall in love with me, then destroy them just as easily. But you've ruined that plan by being smart enough to listen to her warnings." The messages became increasingly disturbing as the night went on. Nathan detailed intimate conversations he'd had with Chloe, but twisted them into something ugly and humiliating. He threatened to share private photos she'd sent him during their relationship. He promised to destroy her professional reputation the same way he'd destroyed Lauren's. Chloe blocked Nathan on every platform she could think of, but he kept finding new ways to reach her. He created fake accounts, used voice-changing software to leave threatening voicemails, and even had friends contact her on his behalf. The harassment campaign that followed was methodical and cruel. Nathan contacted Chloe's clients, claiming to be a former colleague who wanted to warn them about her unprofessional conduct. He left fake reviews on her professional profiles, describing her as unreliable and emotionally unstable. Nathan posted Chloe's private photos on revenge porn websites, along with fabricated stories about their relationship. He created fake social media accounts in her name and used them to post controversial opinions that could damage her professional reputation. Most disturbing was Nathan's ability to find and exploit Chloe's vulnerabilities. During their 8 months together, Chloe had shared her fears, her insecurities, her past traumas. Nathan used every piece of personal information as ammunition in his campaign to destroy her life. Nathan contacted Chloe's family members, sharing twisted versions of stories Chloe had told him in confidence. He reached out to her ex-boyfriends, pretending to be concerned about her mental health while sharing intimate details about their relationship. Chloe realized that Nathan had spent 8 months not just pretending to love her, but studying her, learning her patterns, her relationships, her weaknesses, building a comprehensive understanding of her life that he could weaponize when she no longer served his purposes. The worst part was the isolation. Nathan's campaign was so comprehensive, so well coordinated, that Chloe began to question her own judgment. Friends started asking about the disturbing posts they'd seen from her online. Family members questioned her about the stories Nathan was spreading. Clients became hesitant to work with her. Chloe felt like she was losing her mind. Nathan had twisted their shared history so thoroughly that she began to question her own memories of their relationship. Had she really been as happy as she'd thought? Had the red flags been there all along? Lauren became Chloe's lifeline during this period. She understood what Chloe was going through because she'd experienced the same systematic destruction. Together, they documented Nathan's harassment campaign and built a case for law enforcement. But prosecuting Nathan was complicated by the interstate nature of his crimes and the digital methods he used. Many of his actions existed in legal gray areas: harassment disguised as concerned warnings, revenge disguised as sharing true stories about his experiences. The investigation took months, during which Nathan continued his campaign of psychological terrorism. He seemed to have unlimited time and energy to devote to destroying both women's lives. It was as if their destruction had become his full-time job. Eventually, law enforcement was able to build a case against Nathan for cyberstalking, harassment, and non-consensual sharing of intimate images. But by the time he was arrested, the damage to both Chloe and Lauren's lives was extensive. Nathan was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but Chloe knew that wouldn't be the end of it. People like Nathan don't reform. They just get better at hiding their true nature. When he was released, he would likely find new victims to target. new women to manipulate and destroy. Chloe learned that the anonymity of online relationships could be a double-edged sword. While it allowed people to connect across distances, it also made it easier for predators to craft false personas and manipulate their victims. Nathan had spent 8 months building trust with Chloe, learning her deepest secrets, and positioning himself as her closest confidant. When he turned that knowledge into weapons, the betrayal was more devastating than any physical assault could have been. Chloe had to rebuild her entire online presence, her professional reputation, and her ability to trust other people. She learned to compartmentalize her digital life, never sharing too much with anyone she hadn't met in person, always maintaining walls that felt unnatural but necessary. The scariest realization was how easy it had been for Nathan to find her in the first place. Chloe's online presence, her gaming profiles, her professional website, her social media accounts had provided a roadmap for someone who wanted to manipulate her. Every detail she'd shared publicly had been ammunition for Nathan's campaign of deception. 3 years later, Chloe still receives occasional messages from accounts she suspects are Nathan using new identities. The messages are subtle, friend requests with no mutual connections, comments on old posts that seem innocent but feel threatening, emails that could be spam, but might be more. Chloe knows that Nathan is probably out of prison by now, probably targeting new victims, probably using the same methodical approach that had worked so well on her and Lauren. She sometimes searches online for other women who might be dating Nathan, hoping to warn them, but knowing that her warnings would likely be dismissed the same way she'd initially wanted to dismiss Lauren's message. Chloe learned that the most dangerous predators aren't the ones who strike quickly and obviously. They're the ones who take their time, who build genuine emotional connections, who make their victims complicit in their own manipulation. By the time you realize what's happening, they know everything about you, and you know nothing real about them. The long-distance relationship that had seemed so romantic, so pure, so based on genuine connection rather than physical attraction, had actually been the perfect cover for an elaborate psychological trap. Nathan had used the distance and the digital mediation to hide his true self while extracting maximum information about Chloe's vulnerabilities. Chloe still thinks about what might have happened if Lauren hadn't been brave enough to warn her. If Nathan had actually visited Chicago, if they'd met in person, if she'd fallen even deeper into his web of lies before discovering the truth. She knows that some women aren't as lucky as she was, don't receive warnings in time, don't have other victims willing to break their silence. The internet is full of Nathan Prices, people who use digital spaces to craft false identities, target vulnerable victims, and conduct elaborate campaigns of manipulation and revenge. They hide behind screen names and fake profiles, protected by distance and anonymity, free to destroy lives without ever showing their true faces. Chloe now advocates for digital safety education, trying to help other people recognize the warning signs she'd missed. But she knows that the most effective predators are the ones who don't show obvious warning signs, who are patient enough to build genuine trust before exploiting it. The relationship that had felt like the deepest connection of Chloe's life had actually been the most sophisticated manipulation she'd ever experienced, and the man she'd loved for 8 months had never really existed at all. These 6 stories share a common thread that should terrify all of us. They show how people we trust with our hearts can become the monsters in our nightmares. Sarah's photographer who turned love into obsession. Jessica's perfect boyfriend who followed her across continents. Maya's social media expert who weaponized the internet against her. Amanda's successful partner who made revenge his full-time job. Elena's family man who preferred possession over love. and Chloe's long-distance romance that was built on lies from the very first message. Each of these women thought they knew the person they were dating. They shared their secrets, their vulnerabilities, their deepest fears with someone they trusted. They never imagined that the person lying next to them, holding their hand, promising them forever, was actually studying them, learning their weaknesses, preparing for the day when that knowledge would become ammunition. The most chilling part isn't what these men did after the relationships ended. It's how normal they seemed during the relationships, how charming, how loving, how perfect they appeared to be. These weren't obvious monsters hiding in dark alleys. These were the men you'd bring home to meet your parents, the ones your friends would envy you for dating. But beneath their perfect facades, they were something else entirely. They were collectors of human beings, treating relationships like ownership contracts. They were patient predators who understood that the most effective way to destroy someone isn't with violence. It's with betrayal, isolation, and the systematic destruction of everything that person values. These stories are happening right now, in your city, in your social circle, maybe even in your own family. Someone you know might be dating their own Marcus, David, Ryan, Jake, Michael, or Nathan. Someone charming, someone perfect, someone who seems too good to be true. Because sometimes, when something seems too good to be true, it's because someone has spent a lot of time making it seem that way, and the price of that perfection might be higher than you ever imagined. The next time you feel like you've found your soulmate, remember these stories. Remember that the most dangerous people are often the ones who make you feel the safest. And remember that some love stories aren't romance, they're horror stories in disguise. Trust your instincts, protect your privacy, and never forget that the person who claims to love you more than anyone else might actually be the person who's capable of hurting you most. Sweet dreams. If these stories made your skin crawl, like the video. It tells the algorithm you survived. Subscribe and turn on the bell. We drop new nightmares regularly. Share with someone brave or someone who thinks they are. Comment below. We want to know what you would have done. Some stories don't end when the lights come on. This is Dread Dynasty. We'll see you in the next scare.